Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia. Welcome back to another matchup here in our semifinal round of our Season 3 of the Subscriber Game Tournament as we continue with our matchup between Yulia and Trivenicus. In their first match, Yulia won on the map selected by herself, and now we switch to a map selected by Trivenicus for match 2, and he will get first pick and ban, and we'll see if he can force a tiebreaker here. And looking at the pick bans, starting things off, Trivenicus will ban Mu Lu, answered by Liu Chong, Yan Baihu, Huang Fusong, Pei Yuanshao, and Zhang Jiao. So both players kept the majority of their bans from their first match, but made one modification each to sort of respond to the conditions of that first match, as Trivenicus is swapping out Yuanshao's ban for Pei Yuanshao, as that sneaky Wisdom the River usage on non-strategists caught him off guard, and he does not want to deal with that anymore, so we have the ban here. Then for Yulia's side, we have a ban on Liu Chong, as Trivenicus demonstrated he's willing to first pick it and also play it quite well in their first matchup. And that's going to lead to a Xu Huang first pick by Trivenicus, answered by Zhang Liang from Yulia. Now, Xu Huang was picked by Yulia last match. Trivenicus sees that it's open, sees that Yulia prioritized it quite heavily. It's definitely a very powerful general, and it's being snatched up here by Trivenicus on the first pick. And the answer of Zhang Liang is very core to Yulia's playstyle, as she plays with those 6 Tyrant Slayers to help win out the general fight. So no surprises here. Then for the next round of bans, starting with Yulia, we have a ban on Ventral again, and it's answered by a ban on Yuanshao. So both generals were banned in the previous match as well by these players. They're just coming in a little bit later. I mean, for Ventral, it's the same slot. Instead of answering with a Sun Ce ban, now that Xu Huang's unbreakable, the ban's going back to Yuanshao, which is very good at turning infantry into unbreakable units, even if they have any sort of morale issue on the cheaper unit side of things. So definitely a good ban. And that's going to be answered by picks from Yulia in Lu Bu. And then we have an answer of Gong Du. So Lu Bu, obviously a strong general as well. But a potential issue here that I already spot is that we now have 2 generals who are mostly going to be fielding cavalry, since Zhang Liang's going to be a Tyrant Slayer general. So you can think of him as a vanguard of sorts. And Lu Bu doesn't have that many good infantry options unless you're going to go with things like Camp Crushers, which is not really that great. Or maybe Protector of Heaven could be an option. But in general, you're expecting cavalry. And when both your generals are kind of cavalry heavy, you can definitely answer that with a lot of spear units. And we'll see if that's the case. Gongdu, all around capable general. I think he's picked mostly for his own stats and abilities rather than his unit. He can field a wide variety of Yellow Turban units, so we're not going to dive into that. And then the bans here that will close things out will be Xu Chu from Trivenicus, another very strong general, and answered by He Man, which is a general that Trivenicus played in the previous match using that hail of arrows. But Trivenicus is going a different route this time. As you can see on the final pick, we have Yan Yu taken by Trivenicus and Cao Cao by Yulia. This is very interesting. So Yan Yu here, aside from being a mending general, is going to pick up probably spirit units, given that he is a champion here. And the map that Trivenicus has picked, so he knows exactly what he wants, is a very flat map. It's a swampy map. A lot of little puddles in the middle. It's also set to rain. So I'm guessing a lot of spear units from Gongdu and Yan Yu, perhaps even from Xu Huang, to answer those 2 picks earlier on shown by Yulia. And the answer of Cao Cao as the 3rd pick is quite odd, in my opinion. So you can speed up ability spamming, which is what Cao Cao is usually brought for. It's only good on Lu Bu's abilities here, but he doesn't really shore up that many unit concerns. Perhaps we're going to see Qingzhou unit spams on Cao Cao to kind of shore up the lack of infantry from the first 2 generals. But we're going to see that as we move on to the unit composition here. And indeed, looking at Yulia's composition, we have a splash of Qingzhou Ji users on Cao Cao, 5 units, and 2 Camp Crushers on Lu Bu. The rest of the army are all shock cavalry, which is definitely predicted by Trivenicus, as if you look at Trivenicus comp, we have 10 spear units to answer that, and they are decent ones. They're not very expensive. We have 2 US spearmen, which are not that great, but the White Tiger Raider also has a spear option with formation, so they could also work in that regard. And then we have 6 units of the Qingzhou units, 1 Guardian of the Land. I think that's a Fervent Defender, which isn't that strong of a spear unit from the old Turban roster, but they're all over the place. 2 crossbow units here as well, Watchmen of the Peace. They can trade against other range unit because they do have that shield. Aside from that, with Yulia fielding no range unit in this case, they would have to march into that 2 horseback huntsmen as well as 4 poison shots from those White Tiger Raider. Definitely a very strong composition against what Yulia has. I think if you're thinking ahead with your third blind pick, the fact that Yulia knows she picked 2 Vanguard generals should probably prioritize Sentinels for that third pick, or something that can field melee infantry, strong ones, that can counter enemy spear units, because the enemy's most likely going to bring spear units if they read the draft correctly, which in this case I think Trivenicus definitely read the draft correctly, and we'll see if it actually plays out on the field. It's a very flat map, as you can see with the glimpse here. A lot of water in the middle. It's also set to rain. It's basically going to be a showdown on the open field. There's not going to be too much geographic advantages. Lack of trees, perhaps, is the reason why this is picked. Also, it's kind of fancy looking with all the water. We'll check it out in the deployment phase. So looking at deployment here, nothing too crazy. You can be in these water. These are very shallow water. And you can see that's set to rain. Yulia has just placed her army here. There's nothing too out of sorts. 8 cavalry in the back, 5 infantry in the front, 2 camp crushers in the middle. No range block chance on these, means those crossbow actually do a lot of damage to them. So we'll see if they are able to get those shots. Poison arrows also great against infantry. There's just a lot of spear units to protect this comp. Harassment from the archers. The general strength is also quite balanced. Lu Bu is strong, but not as strong as Xu Huang in my opinion. Just more health on Xu Huang. And the stats are slightly better with the evasion as well. Cao Cao is not that strong of a general, even though he has a good weapon, faced up against basically generals with a lot of health. 2 guys with 54k health. This is a very similar strategy that Yulia used in her Season 2 comps, where she basically runs 3 generals with 54k health and try to overpower the general fights. Zhao Liang, Cao Cao, and Lu Bu are just not going to answer as well because of the lack of health on Cao Cao and Lu Bu. So we'll see how that plays out. It's just an interesting third pick of Cao Cao there. Not sure what it actually achieves. I mean, you do get Impervious Presence, but what ability are we really spamming here? As there are range units on Trivenicus' side, he doesn't really have to be the one advancing here. He can harass, force them to come. There's no range ability to answer. I think if Unbreakable wasn't so much of an issue for the armies here, like Cao Cao has Unbreakable, which is the main value there. Maybe someone like Taishitsu would have been a better third choice. Alright, both army rotating into each other. They have to get into range first. I don't think there's any sort of terrain debuffs for these little shallows. Just treat these as land. Visually, they're going to be a little bit different, but that's about it. I do think Yulia has developed a bad habit playing her elephant comps, in that she splits her infantry and her cavalry units quite far from each other. Previously, she would have a bunch of cavalry, and this side would just be a charging wolf pack plus 2 elephants. Now it's a little bit different. The infantry should fight together, and the cavalry could definitely be spread out a bit more. For Trivenicus, this is all about protecting those precious range units. He has screens and screens of spear units that's going to be placed around them. and let those range units do some work, because all those units over there are vulnerable to range. 0 range block chance on anything. And Cao Cao does not have Stone Borg, so you can't protect them either. There's a little bit of temper deflection, but that's about it. Yeah, this over-aggression on the charging of the cavalry, you can see the command inputs, all the units on one unit. It's really not needed. The cavalry can just stay in the back. The general can just charge up. The cavalry can just kind of hover. Cause they're risking the cavalry being run into the enemy range. You can see there's much more interactions between Trivenicus' units and his cavalry. They're harassing, but they're close enough, kind of force the enemy to not get close. Whereas these infantry can't help. If the fighting occurs here with the cavalry, they can't make it. Wide flanks are not going to do much here. I think the only hope is to get these value from the cavalry is to charge the infantry up while they have temper deflection to clash this initial line, and then once the line clash, there's openings for the cavalry. Or Lü Bu just have to go in and actually just start slamming things and get out. It's gonna be hard. These 2 crossbows are gonna do quite a bit to these shot cavalry. Essentially, this comp, everything counters Tyrant Slayers, because Trivenicus knows for a fact there are 6 of them coming. Alright, Poison Arrow. Like, flanking doesn't achieve much unless there's a front line. So they need to clash, because they're all spears. Like, what are you going to hit? And without a Wisdom River here, the general fights, because Pianshaw's banned. Not only that, we now have Mending on one side. So not only do you get a heal, the stats on these generals are going to be off the charts once the combat actually breaks out, because we're going to get 50% melee evasion, 50% armor on top of that. And these generals are going to be untouchable. Xu Huang's going to be over 100% evasion, going to be over 100% armor. Gongdu going to be over 100% armor, 71% evasion, and he's going to be 81% evasion, 100% armor, 105% armor. So they're just going to be really strong generals even in that fight, even when these Tyrant Slayers get the extra damage. And I don't think Trivenicus wants to actually break down general fight in the middle because he has no cavalry support. So he's just going to be waiting. He's going to inch this up a little bit farther so the range unit can hit the enemy infantry or hit the enemy range cavalry to force them to either commit or go back farther and farther. I mean, if the cooldown's ready, Yulia's shot of breaking this is just a frontal infantry charge. Because her infantry, similar quality, slightly better quality. Camp Crushers need to get in here. They can do damage if they get a pile of enemy infantries, but they can't be whittled down on the way. That's the big issue. They can't be whittled down on the way. They can't really do anything here. They charge. If they get into enemy range, they're just going to get shredded here, so they can't actually charge. I mean, this is just a really smart comp. I think the generals have to do something. If they don't, the units aren't going to win this. They're going to get poked away. The generals can come in and stop them. We got slam abilities on Xu Huang just to come in here, do a roar, do a slam on the Qingzhou units. They lose way too much on that. There's no need to commit the cavalry as well. I don't like this. I feel like Lü Bu can do the same thing here. The cavalry can hover. If they chase, Lü Bu backs up a little, and then they overchase, and then the cavalry come in afterwards. Now we just got a full-on charge. But very disjointed one, given the cavalry's going in first. Yeah, you can see the range is going to push that away. They're just nothing but shield in Yulia's comp. That's the problem. That's why I think the third choice, instead of going with Cao Cao, or if you're going with Cao Cao, you actually want Qingzhou assault infantry, because you're not worried about the cavalry fight. You have so many cavalry units. Like, you're not going to lose to any other cavalry general. especially since the first two general pick were Gongdu and Xu Huang. There's no good Yellow Turban cavalry except for Messenger of Heaven. And since Xiang Jiao's banned, you're not going to get any good cavalry on Gongdu. And Xu Huang's not going to be fielding cavalry. He's going to be using Qingzhou units most likely. I mean, if he picks cavalry, it's at best some northern lancer. And that's not going to do very much. So the cavalry side was already winning. I don't know what these Qingzhou cavalry choices were meant to beat. Because now they're running up against a very bad situation. The temper deflection was already used. This flank is not big enough. It's going to all be about that mending usage. They need to shoot camp crushers. They need to shoot the camp crushers. I think fire will is turned off. They need to start shooting the camp crushers. Cavalry should just wait. The generals can drag the enemy generals out, I'm pretty sure. They just need to charge in here, do a slam, and then charge out. There's no reason they need to be up here. I mean, they didn't fire. Yeah, the micro here is lacking, so they got a free run up. Just charge now. They need to charge. They're walking. They're not... Oh, there we go. There we go. Charge. Everyone gets a charge target. The cavalry shouldn't be thrown in like this. I think Yulia also did this and got away with it with her elephants against the Defender of Empire comp. She just sacked her cavalry. There's no reason to sack the cavalry. They should just wait. This is just such a waste. Wait till there are openings. The generals can pop those openings. Like, the general fight right now, they need help by the cavalry. Once we need to see a mending usage here real quick to balance against all these buffs. Trivenicus is not using any of his general abilities. There we go, that mending. Yeah, that's gonna change things real quick. They're dismounted, they have mending on. Yeah, the cavalry's coming in, but they have too much stats. I don't think the cavalry can do anything to them unless they get a clean charge. Camp Crusher's not closing the gap. Alright, Yulia's dismounted as well. She wants this fight. Lu Bu's getting whacked. I don't know why she would want to fight during the mending. Yeah, Lu Bu's gone. Got the smash. Killing field. There's just way too much health on these generals yet. Easy work. Cao Cao's gonna die next. So because one side charged and one side didn't, the charging side, obviously, they're the same unit. The charging side's gonna win that with extra damage. But Xu Huang's so healthy. Cao Cao's gonna get killed here. I feel like the Watchmen's, they got their fire will turned off, and they weren't able to do much against the Camp Crushers, but I don't think it's going to matter. The problem is, even with so many cavalry units alive, they can't kill the generals, and there's so many spear units around them. They're just going to get slowly killed here. Yeah, they're just clumping and getting slammed. I think if they were kept on the outside, and then once the formation breaks like this, they can come in, pick out the weak units, and then one Tyrant Slayer at each enemy would have been much more efficient. Clumping it together just gives the enemy a really great slam target, and Cao Cao is just useless. Temporary unbreakable, just not gonna do much. Cao Cao doing his best. And still alive, still alive. Another mending coming in. Oh, there goes Cao Cao. And that should do it. So very good match. I think this comes down to the pig ban phase. Trivenicus identified the enemy comp very easily. I think Yulia is super attached to her Zhangliang pick, and it's being exposed really hard right now. Those Tyrant Slayers getting 0 value against the spear. They're also being used very poorly. I feel like having all 6 clumped up, the charging to spear was suicide first off, and then clumped up into generals with slam abilities is just a big no-no. They're not going to get as high of a charge off, and then once they're kind of clump up, they just get slammed, and then they just die. So that was a bit unfortunate. I think they were kept on the outskirts. If the infantry got such a clean charge, that was ready to win. Let them get the charge off, and then the cavalry can flank around, pick off these range unit that, break out of the formation after the front line dies. And then the enemy general wants to come fight your general, then you charge 1 cavalry at them to give them a threat, do some damage with 1 charge, and then if that unit gets killed, send another guy in afterwards. Don't pile all 6 together. That's basically suicide. And there we have it. We have a tie. So I don't think either player picked a map that was extremely one-side favored. I think both map had a lot of flavor to them, but not really favoring any side in particular. There are a lot of changing terrain maps where you have like high elevation on one side and low elevation on the other side. Those map might be a little bit more advantageous to one side, and there's also heavily forested map that you could have picked. Both maps were pretty fair. It came down to the unit and the play of both players, the micro ability. I think this army comp difference was a big issue, but most of that's actually attributed to pig ban, which is not going to matter now, as the tiebreak match will go back to the waterfall map we see in round 2, the round of 8. For the tiebreak match there, Yulia played on that map against S.A. Wangpain, and both players will have full freedom in which units they select for that one. So we'll see a pretty good blind showdown between the two. And that's also going to be a bit of a mind game, because at this point, Yulia has only used 1 comp whenever it went to a blind match. And we'll see if Trivenicus has a counter to that. We'll see if Yulia can sense that, perhaps, and change her comp accordingly to counter the counter. There's definitely a lot of layers to that, and we'll see if what both players goes with on that last map. So until then, bye!